What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another fantasy football video. It's Thursday, so time for another strategy video. It's the opposite of what we had last week. Last week was the RB0 strategy. This week we're going towards the wide receiver 0 strategy. And if you can't tell by what it's called, it's the complete opposite. Before we hop into that, two quick things I want to note. Last week's video, I was going to say, I just completely forgot. I thought I had a slide on it. The original creator, I don't exactly remember how many years ago, but it was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, something like that, 5-6 years ago. It was Shawn Siegele who originally created the RB0 strategy. I completely forgot to mention him in the video. I highly recommend that you guys read his article that he originally created for the strategy, because it goes over everything I talked about. He's got different numbers and stuff that I've used because I use some of my own stuff, but I highly recommend you guys. You can find that easily. Just type into Google like Shawn Siegele. I'll put it in the description. How about that? I'll put it in the description of that video. So go over to go to my page. I'll put it in both. I'll put it in this one and the other one. But I highly recommend you guys watch that. And also, second thing, if I sound a little off right now, I don't know. I got attacked by a swarm of bees earlier today, and if it wasn't for Benadryl, I would not be making this video. So you can thank Benadryl is the sponsor of this video today, because it would not be happening without that. But without further ado, let's get into the wide receiver 0 strategy. So this video isn't going to be as long as the other one because there isn't as much to talk about, and I don't recommend it as much, which is why I don't want to talk about it as much. But it's something we can use to like a smaller extent, and that's what I'll show after, because I do the exact same structure for this video as the other one, where I'm going to show you guys the method behind it and then show you the teams I've created to follow through for the year. So this is the method behind why you would use this strategy. And whereas RB0 is used pretty much strictly in PPR scoring, half point it's okay and I would avoid it in standard, it's the opposite with wide receiver 0. You would strictly use it in standard, whereas in PPR it's probably something you should avoid doing unless, I always say unless there's extreme value, but I'm talking like extreme value. So unless like the first, 8 picks are running backs, we'll take Antonio Brown at that point. But as you'll see after, if you're like a later pick in the first round, you can definitely use this no matter really who's been taken. But it's because of this graph. It's the value of hitting on a running back in standard scoring far outweighs the value of a wide receiver. And the only part you see where it's negative, which would mean in the wide receiver's favor, so it was more important to hit on a top 5 wide receiver, was 2015, which was the historic year for running backs tanking. And you see the big graph in 2016. Well, that was just the opposite. It was an aberration for the running backs in 2016. So we can basically expect like 2012 to 2014 what those look like every single year. And so when the value of hitting on a running back is higher, and you couple that with the changing in passing, more and more receivers becoming qualified receivers. For me, that was 40 receptions through my research. But every single year, lower receivers are getting more and more targets. And you look at wide receiver 21 through 40 per year, they're getting more and more and more points. So you say, basically, it's so important to hit on a running back, but even if I don't hit on a big wide receiver, well, I can get some guys in the mid to late rounds that are produce pretty similar production. So I should take shots early to try and get a running back. And again, you guys have seen all of these charts. This one proves that point perfectly. It's going down, the difference between the percentage of points for each position is getting closer. So the percentage of points the top 10's making up is getting closer to what 11 through 20 and what 21 through 30 is making. So it's really the slot receiver has changed it a lot, but you can get middle round guys that are producing closer and closer production. That's the whole mentality behind this. What some people do, and what I recommend, is saying, first 3 rounds, maybe I should try and get some sort of 2 running back and a wide receiver combination, because I still want to try and hit an elite wide receiver. So I'm not going to lock myself into a box and say I need first and second round and then a 3rd round wide receiver. But I'm going to say, as a tiebreaker, if 2 players are ranked similarly, which likely they will be, I'm going to lean running back in a standard scoring format for at least 2 of my first 3 picks. So this is what I did. I went full on wide receiver 0 on the wide receiver 0 team. It was the same thing as Oh, and I forgot to change that. It was the same thing as the running back 0, spot-wise. It was 12-team league, 10th overall scoring, but then it's actually, I wrote PPR on the screen, but it's not. It's standard scoring for this. I use standard scoring ADPs like to make this. So I did the same thing. The 10 spot, you could go RB0, you could go wide receiver 0, you could go value based. Like that's a spot where you could do anything you wanted. So first 5 picks are more what we're leaning to say the difference. Devonta Freeman, DeMarco Murray, Ty Montgomery, Carlos Hyde, and Eddie Lacy. You're basically saying with this strategy, I think that if I take 5 shots in the first 5 rounds, I can hit on 2. Because generally speaking, rosters are constructed in a way that the flex should usually be a wide receiver. Definitely in a PPR and half point. You can do their flex as a running back in standard scoring formats, but they should probably be pretty good, which is possible with this team. But typically, if I got these first 5 picks, I want 2 to hit. Now, who's most likely to hit? I mean, obviously Freeman and Murray. But if one of those goes down, we've got shots on Montgomery, we've got shots on Hyde, we've got shots on Lacy. And then I guess Duke Johnson later. But I would say that in a standard scoring format, it's very unlikely Duke Johnson is one of the 2 guys you hit on. So we look at this team and we say, well, were we able to find in the middle rounds, because this is what mock drafts are for, we took all these 5 guys, were we able to find value later? Absolutely. And obviously everything's easier to find value for later in PPR, but even in standard, I mean, you're getting Emmanuel in the 6th round, Willie Snead 7th, Jeremy Maclin 8th, Tyrell Williams 10th round, and then Kevin White was just like a super shot in the 13th. But I'm very confident in my receiving core if it's Emmanuel, Willie Snead, Jeremy Maclin, and Tyrell Williams. I'm very confident in that. Is it going to outproduce the guys who took, Antonio and then Dez? No. It's absolutely not, and it doesn't even have close to the same upside. But in a standard scoring format, I think that generally speaking, that's enough to get by 2 or 3 guys. And since I've taken so many shots at running backs, and you also have to think about it from this standpoint, you just took 5 running backs away from everyone else. So even if only 3 of them do well, you've taken running backs away from other people and you've forced them to try and find value elsewhere. So if you take 5 of the top 20 running backs, there's only 15 left for everyone else. So they're likely to have weak running back cores, whereas you have a monster running back core. And since running backs are so important in standard scoring, that's what the whole mentality behind this is. So let's look at the rosters. Again, for the, I don't remember who the quarterback was for the value-based team and the other one. I was going to use the exact same roster as for the other video for this value team, but the ADPs were a little bit off and unrealistic when you switch from PPR to standard, so I made a new one. So the value team is Jameis Winston. We got Devonta Freeman, because it was the same pick that first round. I wanted to keep everything the same. Carlos Hyde, Michael Thomas, Demaryius Thomas, Jimmy Graham, and Willie Snead. That's the starting lineup. And again, I've drafted teams that I would like, and I really think that that's a great team. The bench is a little bit weaker. That's why I always say value-based teams' benches are always weaker, because you took a tight end, generally you took a tight end a little bit early and a quarterback a little bit early. I always take my tight end and my quarterback late, which is why my benches are usually so good. But the bench isn't bad here. I mean, Tyrell and Kevin White are still there. Still got Lacy and Duke Johnson, but then it's the other 2 that kind of took a hit. Jacquizz Rodgers, I think, is a great pick this year, but then Jonathan Williams is more of just really a flyer late. But there's a chance that either one of these teams could be better, and I'm going to follow them throughout the year just to kind of see how these strategies work. It's just that the wide receiver 0 team has a little bit more upside if it can hit on Freeman and Murray being top 5. Because the value of hitting on 2 top 5 running backs basically makes it so that if you're streaming quarterback, defense, kicker, as long as your wide receivers don't completely tank, you're fine. So that's what the wide receiver 0 strategy is. If you're going to use it, if you're going to use it, you have to do 5 rounds, or else it's not called the wide receiver 0 strategy. If you are going to do it, you should probably have a later pick in the first round, in my opinion, so you can hit on 2 studs, and then the rest of them you can take a little bit more risk, because I guess Hyde's a little risky, Montgomery's a little risky, but that's what you would do in a strategy like this. Like in the RB0 strategy, I would take risk on a guy like Sammy Watkins, because I know that even if he duds, I have other guys, and if he doesn't dud, then my team is amazing. So you can take a little bit more risk. What I would recommend over this strategy is to look at your first 3 rounds and target 2 running backs in standard scoring. Now, obviously that's easy with the top 3 pick, and that's easy with the later first round pick. If you're in the middle, I would still recommend, if you're at 4, 5, and 6, grabbing Antonio, Julio, and Odell in whatever order you prefer, with Antonio being first, whichever order you prefer with Julio and Odell. I have Odell slightly ahead of him in standard scoring. But other than those picks, this is fine to use. I just think some people overvalue the running back a little bit in standard scoring. Some people have been saying that they didn't like my draft because I took Antonio Brown at 4 instead of LeSean McCoy. And that is not a good argument. You cannot say that. Like, don't reach too far for running backs. I wouldn't ever target using one of these strategies specifically. So I would never go into a draft saying, well, I'm going wide receiver 0. I'm just taking running backs no matter what. I would say that if you're at the end of the first and the best 2 players are running backs and you get to your 3rd round pick, I wouldn't panic and take a wide receiver you don't like. I would say just take some shots on some more running backs and then figure out wide receiver late, because if you look at this, it's pretty easy to do. I mean, honestly, it's pretty easy to figure out wide receiver late and off free agency, because remember, that's a thing. So if you're comfortable going into the year with Emmanuel, Willie Snead, Macklin Tyrell, and Kevin White, then why not take shots on the running back since they're so important? Again, just to go over it, you do not do this strategy in PPR, just like you don't do the RB0 strategy in standard scoring. It's just stupid to do, even if the value's there, to be honest. You need to find value at the positions that actually matter, depending on your scoring system. I would also not do this in a 2 quarterback lead, because you're going to get stuck with some crummy quarterbacks. And then that's the same thing as a super flex league. So I would say this strategy is only viable in standard and half point PPR. But in standard scoring, it's definitely viable. So that is the end of this video. Hope you did enjoy. If you did, please hit that like button. It means a lot to us. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching.